What's up, everybody? I'm Dr. C.I., the CEO and founder of Diversity LLC, and this is episode 15 in our 2018 learning series. So today, we're going to be talking to you about cultural appropriation. Now, in that conversation, I figured it was better to bring in a subject matter expert to talk about what that is. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Patricio Koo, to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, what's up? My name is Patricio Koo. I'm here from Austin, Texas, living in Seattle now. And I'm a consultant with Diversity LLC, and I'm here today to talk about cultural appropriation, something I've always had a big interest in and a lot of thoughts around, and so we're going to dig in today and start the dialogue. So let's get to it.
So, talk to our audience about what is cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation is basically when a majority culture takes elements or pieces from a minority culture, and typically this minority culture has been historically disenfranchised. I've usually been ridiculed for that same piece of culture at some point in history. All right. So an example of cultural appropriation that's really big in our culture is hip hop. A couple years ago, you had Miley Cyrus, you had Taylor Swift. They were twerking in their music videos, and twerking is a dance that originally came from the Black community.
That's right.
Now, not only is this cultural appropriation because they were taking something and not giving any credit, but they were also just showing very little interest, and they were making profit off of a dance that was originally looked down upon because it came from strip clubs. And it didn't even come from strip clubs, it actually came from West Africa.
That's right. But Patricio, isn't cultural appropriation just appreciation?
Well, not quite. Cultural appropriation is essentially like cherry picking. You're taking one element from a culture without understanding the entire culture, and you're reducing it to a trend. So when we talk about culture, culture is the culmination of ideas, of knowledge, of art that comes together in a specific circumstance in geography and history. And so when we talk about culture, culture is real. So basically, we want to give credit where credit is due. We want to give money where money is due. And just because you have one friend that is of a certain culture does not give you a pass. Just because that one friend tells you that you can wear dreadlocks or you can wear Dia de los Muertos makeup, that does not mean that that's okay.
And for the record, stop being that friend that says that it is. So Patricio, when is it okay to borrow from other cultures?
Well, that's a good question, Cheryl. I like to say that it's all about the invitation. Now, the invitation is not an invitation from your one friend that's a person of color to go ahead and appropriate their culture. The invitation is something where somebody brings you into their culture because they trust you, and they trust you enough to bring you into something special. So a couple examples of that. One example is wearing saris at an Indian wedding. Now on a daily basis, it's not okay if you're not Indian to go around wearing saris or bindis.
Right.
However, if you have a friend that is Indian and they're getting married and they trust you enough to bring you into a ceremony that is sacred and special to them, and you are going to participate in that wedding, then that is okay for you to borrow from that culture in that instance and wear that sari. Now, another example, let's talk about Eminem. Does Eminem appropriate hip-hop culture? Absolutely he does. Cultural appropriation always has a capitalist element to it. And the fact that Eminem is making more money off of being a rapper than Black people who invented that culture, that means that he is absolutely appropriating hip-hop culture. However, he did have an invitation. He had an invitation from Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre saw that there was this kid from Detroit who grew up in an extremely low-income neighborhood. He grew up around Black people, and he had some pretty good style and flow. So he gave that invitation to Eminem and brought him into the studio, molded him, and made it okay for him to be a hip hop superstar.
So, Patricio, what about cultural assimilation? Let's say a minority culture immigrates to a new place. Is it cultural appropriation to adopt the new culture?
It's not, because in cultural appropriation, you have a dominant culture that is taking elements from a minority culture, often for capital gains. Now, when a minority culture moves to another country, that minority culture is often forced to adapt and adopt some of the culture of that country. Now, this is not cultural appropriation because that adaptation is literally a survival skill. In order to survive in that country, in order to be successful, they have to take elements from that country's culture and incorporate it into their own daily lives so that they can make a living for themselves. So this was just a short conversation on cultural appropriation. These views are my own, and my own views are always changing. This conversation was intended to spark the dialogue, so please comment on this video. Let's keep the conversation going, and let's make sure that non-white people are getting the credit they deserve, the profit they deserve for their beautiful ideas, art, culture, etc. Y'all take care and have a great day.
Yes, on behalf of Diverse City, we want to thank y'all for coming out, and we also want to thank Patricio for blessing us with his knowledge on this great topic, and we hope that y'all learned something today. Make sure that you look in the description for the tools, because we'll have some extra resources for you to continue to talk about this topic. Y'all stay blessed and be well.